This is the Wheelhouse podcast. It's easily digestible, it's mostly factual, and more importantly, it's 9 episodes old. History being made on a weekly basis. This week is going to be a big one. All things Vuelta, chaos, carnage, triumph in Spain. The road to the gong continues. Some big name retirements as well. Kate Bates this week. Hello to you.
It's good to be here, Joel. It has been a massive week. I feel like, we might all need a little bit of meditation by the end of this one.
Yeah, got to breathe it out.
It's been a lot of roller coasters, some highs and some lows, that's for sure.
Very much so. So a lot happening today. Also going to have a little bit of a chat later on about the mental toll the pro cycling circuit is having on some of our favourite riders. I'm really interested to get into this because we want to see people on the bike. Something's got to give. It's one of those kind of topics. We're going to get into it a bit later. Before anything else, though, I want to have a chat about last week because we had an attempt at making some merchandise to honour the fact that Champ Sis is on board for September for the Wollongong World Championships, which is so exciting. So we made a little bit of a merch. Turns out we got a memo. They said, thanks, but maybe leave the merch construction to us.
Yes. Well, in fairness, it was printed logos, sticky taped onto a hat.
On a printer that was running out of ink, I should say as well. But this wasn't all that sparked it. It was actually sparked by a little incident that will forever be known as Tea Towel Gate. What happened?
Tea Towel Gate. Well, I was doing I can't believe this got noticed to the point that we're talking about it, but alas it has. I was doing the SBS Rest Day ride with Zwift, where we jump on our trainers and we jump on camera at the same time, unpack everything that's happening at the Vuelta. It happens every rest day. You'd think by now I'd have gotten into my routine, given it actually happens on every rest day of the Grand Tours, so it's been a long year with it.
Okay.
Alas, I didn't bring my towel for sweat, and very last minute I thought, oopsie days, grabbed the nearest thing. What can I say? The kitchen is next to the garage. I had a tea towel.
You had a tea towel?
It did the job, Joel, but the problem was I tried to be very subtle, and every time Christophe Malay, who is hosting it, would go full screen to Matt Keenan, or as somebody called him on Zwift this week, the golden tonsils.
Okay, yeah,
So
I like that, yeah.
Yeah,
I
thought that
was John Laws's
I
nickname,
thought that was
I
you,
believe.
Joel. But
We share it. There's a few of us that have the honour of that nickname.
every time they would go full screen to Matt Keenan, I'd dab the face with the tea towel. Christophe stitched me up, I reckon.
I was going to say.
Came back a bit early and it didn't go unnoticed.
Yeah.
I got a bit roasted on social media. Champ Sis also noticed.
Okay.
So, look, they were very good about it.
Yep.
They didn't mock me relentlessly. They just simply said, we'll pop some towels in the post for you. So they did their end. Unfortunately, Australia Post failed us.
No.
And they didn't arrive.
That doesn't sound like them at all, Kate Bates,
No,
this time
but
of
we will get them for us.
Amazing.
And they also heard your call, the need for a chamois to get that.
hang on, wait.
Ben
You mean a chamois?
Connor-itis. The chamois.
Yes, yeah.
Yes,
A
but
chamois?
also, look, I'm listening to our viewer feedback.
Okay.
And chamois is the new
Well, it's
word.
another animal
It
on
is.
board, and that's exciting. Quick shout out to Christophe Malay for not failing to notice the tea towel gate. Thank you,
I know.
Christophe. Always great.
He's cheeky. Well, and I also, in thinking about the chamois and the fact that you're getting some kit, Joel, I've worn my favourite jersey today.
I couldn't help but notice a new animal has joined the ranks.
It
Now,
is.
if
It
I was
is.
thinking of an animal for you, I'd go gazelle, cheetah, something fast, furious, determined. But you've gone in basically a polar opposite direction. What's going on?
I have. It's a custom one-off jersey. It's sloths.
It's sloths.
Yes.
Kate Bates, Olympic cyclist, and the proud spirit animal is a sloth.
Oh, they're so cool. I love them. So, they're drinking coffee, having all sorts of fun. I will put a picture of this on the socials because it's the best jersey I've had. And even though it's one-off, I'm prepared to share it with you, Joel, if you would like a sloth jersey. Otherwise, we might get you one with your spirit animal, which I'm guessing like an emu.
I like an emu. I'd also
think?
accept a hippo because
Hippo.
slow but determined.
Okay.
Or a python because I'm learning to love the pythons.
You did, get the pythons out.
No, I've got a deep fear of
guns out,
snakes.
suns out.
I had
Oh.
I had an encounter with one and we actually connected and we had a little moment. We poked our tongue out at one another, had a friendly hiss. It was like, maybe they're not so bad, so they're growing on me.
Indeed.
Sort
All
of.
right. Well,
Anyway,
see what we can
I'm
do.
just excited this kit. Thank you so much to Champ Sis being on board for the Worlds because I've arrived as a cyclist and the sloth kit's really, really cool. So very, very exciting. Now, I got to say there's sporting memorabilia, there's sporting merch, and then there's sporting memorabilia. Okay, this is Pog. We love talking about Pog. His bike, his TDF bike is up for auction. Have we made a bid?
Well, after Tadej Pogacar won his second tour, they thought, ooh, brilliant, we can do something with this. They put it up for auction. We haven't made a bid, Joel. It's a silent auction.
Yeah.
£450,000 so far.
And counting.
Wow. It's a beautiful bike. I mean, it is
a
a Colnago that is painted in the Maillot jaune. However, there is a catch to this. Firstly, I've got to say I'm not really a memorabilia person, so that blows my mind someone would pay that kind of money. But secondly, it's not the actual bike, Joel. It's a replica.
Oh, it's not the original. I didn't realise that. It's a replica.
Okay. Look, that just doesn't add up to me. But
okay. Yeah, that's always bothered me. The Ashes in cricket does a replica urn for the Ashes. The real ones over in England.
I feel like the resale value on a replica bike is possibly not worth the investment. But anyway, there's that's so
£450,000. That's why we haven't made a bid. Now I understand. Let's move on the Wheelhouse podcast. Easily digestible, mostly factual. We want to talk about women's Vuelta, which is underway at the moment.
The Ceratizit Challenge.
I'm not even going to. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
The Women's Tour of Spain. Let's call it that. The Vuelta I don't even know the French word, the Spanish word for woman.
Women's pursuit of the Rojo.
On that. In pursuit of the women's Rojo.
There you go.
It's 6 days.
Yep.
Started with a team's time trial. You know, I don't love.
I was about to say you're not
in a
big
Grand
on
Tour.
this early on. I said the other week, and you said the C word. I said, "What do you think of the T?" Did you say it's crap, Joel?
I did say it's crap. I think it's a beautiful event.
Yeah.
And in Wollongong, we will actually see a mixed relay, which is a team's time trial of sorts.
Okay.
But I just don't think they have any place in a Grand Tour. But that is how they have chosen to start both the men's and the women's Vueltas this year.
Well, when it's only 6 days, firstly, why only 6 days? And secondly, having a team's time trial as in one of those 6 days, is that why you're a bit sort of, why the TTT?
Yeah, I mean, it could potentially play a very big role in how it ends up. Now, Trek took the win in that one, and Bike Exchange very close in second, which is exciting because a lot of the Bike Exchange riders, Georgia Baker, Alex Manley, they're the ones that are also coming to Wollongong for the World, so it looks like they're on form.
Okay.
Annemiek Van Vlueten's team.
Mate, I was about to say, your mate AWV. Yeah.
She's riding for Spanish team Movistar.
Okay.
She's looking to do the triple this year. She won the women's Giro Donna. She obviously won the women's Tour de France. And now she's looking to go the triple ahead of Wollongong, which she said is a very big target for her to take the Rainbows. I can't see why she won't be able to do it, to be honest, because there's some pretty big hill climbs in there which suit her perfectly. But she did start 25 seconds down after that team's time trial.
Okay.
So,
if anyone can, though.
If anyone can, she can. Alyssa Balsamo was the leader after that first day.
Okay.
So good to see the Italian in the Rojo.
Absolutely. And you know who's in trouble when AVV comes out and says, I'm targeting a certain thing?
Everyone.
The
entire women's field. Yes.
Let's pivot. This is the Wheelhouse podcast. We're chatting about La Vuelta. Let's go to the men's. Now, we were talking about 6 stages for the women's Vuelta. I want to talk about stage 16 of the men's. Now, talking about the best of times and the worst of times, it had more action than a high school dance, more action than schoolies.
I was thinking than a outback rodeo or something.
Sure.
Yeah, either way, you want to slice the cake.
Okay.
It's Roglic. It was his chance to make a dent in the overall. Bit by bit, he'd been eating away at Remco Evenepoel's lead. He took the initiative with a couple of K left to go, did a major attack. Joel, it came undone. He was in a group of about 5 riders off the front. Yeah. Not too far off the front, but about 10 seconds. It looks like he's just clipped a wheel at the back of that bunch, and they're travelling fast. He's come down so hard like a sack of potatoes. Yep. We've seen him fall a lot. You call him
The sticky tape man.
Sticky.
And he needed it again because he was really cut up and both physically and mentally. He was really upset, obviously, because of the tilt.
A lot of blood, Joel.
Yeah.
It was one of the worst we've seen. I mean, not only high speed, but he just looked so shaken up.
Yeah.
And he's such an impressive rider. I have so much respect for him because he's so resilient and he just gets back up and does it again. But he wasn't able to get back up after that one. So he pulled out the next day, which was a shame. But before we knew he was pulling out, this stage, Joel, while this was happening at the front and everybody was oohing and ahhing at that, at the back of the field, Remco Evenepoel was either in distress or pulling off one of the biggest Houdinis in cycling history.
Yes.
When he allegedly got a flat tyre.
I'm so fascinated by this. We've spoken about Rog, the attack and the stack. Now this is Flatgate.
Flatgate.
I don't understand. If you have a look on our social media, you'll be able to see pictures of what appears to be a fully inflated tyre. He's waving for a puncture. Why? A, why? And B, was it flat?
Yeah, well, the story is that he felt it going a little bit squishy with about 5K to go. But they've got this thing called the 3K rule, Joel, where on certain stages, not hilltop finishes, but it was built for flat stages where the sprint can be a bit crazy. If you have a flat or a mechanical within the last 3 kilometres, you will get bunch time. So you won't lose any time.
Okay.
Now, he therefore put his hand up and pulled over with this flat tyre at about the 2.5K mark to go. So well within inside that 3K to make sure he didn't lose any time on overall. Notwithstanding that Rog had just gone 9 seconds up the road, so there was that. But because it didn't look that deflated, people are suggesting that perhaps he was concerned that on that little uphill at the end that he might lose a bit of time, and this gave him a way to roll into the finish without losing any time.
Oh, how controversial. This 3 kilometre rule, this time gap rule has been causing some, I guess, confusion in the whole tour, hasn't it?
It has. So stages... It's quite, I mean, the UCI seems to put out some rules, honestly, that you need a thesis to be able to understand and interpret. But the general way it works is that in any tour, because that's where it counts, where it's GC, you have 3 different designations for stages: a hilly stage, mountaintop finish, a sprint stage, or one that isn't designated.
Sure.
Right? Sprint stages. If you get a flat or a mechanical within the last 3 kilometres, you get bunch time. If there's a up to 3 second gap in the bunch while they're all sprinting crazy, bunch time. They don't put time gaps between up to 3 seconds between bunches, which makes sense, and it's for rider safety, really.
Sure.
Mountaintop finishes, there's none of that. And then the undesignated stages don't get the 3 second time gap rule, but they do get the 3 kilometre flat or mechanical rule. If you can't keep up, you're not the only one.
I'm back
behind.
there. I'm back there. That is so confusing, Kate Bates.
It is, and some of the teams, I think, are getting quite confused about it. We saw it happen at the Vuelta. People were really confused about whether Remco would get bunch time or not. So beyond debating whether he actually got a flat or not, people are trying to understand this 3K rule. But coincidentally, it happened on the same day at the Tour of Britain, where they gave one rider the red jersey, which is also a red leaders jersey at the Tour of Britain, and then they changed that around because they'd accidentally given a 3 second time gap to a rider when they shouldn't have because of this 3K rule. So I think they need to simplify it.
I do too, because that 3 kilometres, you're sort of opening up the opportunity as Remco may or may not have to sort of take. Yeah, I mean
it's a good debate point, but I think it's a pretty big kick to his integrity to suggest that he would fake it. But
Absolutely.
When you and to give a bit of context, Joel, they're riding tubeless tyres these days, and if he was on a tubeless tyre, because I tried to get his exact setup. So we could talk through it, but they're keeping that one a little bit close to their chest.
Yeah.
But they can lose quite a lot of inflation and be very squishy, which would make it quite dangerous in corners, and
Okay.
you definitely feel it, but it doesn't look that flat because it still holds about 30 or 40 psi,
Sure.
which is pounds per square inch, which is what the tyre inflation is measured at. That's about what a car tyre has.
Yep.
But for context, they will usually start the day around 100 psi. So it is flat and it is harder to steer.
I was advised
Even if it
100
looks
psi on the
involved.
racer,
Yes.
and closer to the 34 mark on the mountain
Yes,
bike. And
the wider the tyre,
Yeah.
the less air that you have to put in it. And incidentally, Joel, on a track bike, we used to pump our tyres up to around 190 psi.
and yet
could
you still
bounce a
carry the
coin off
nickname of
them.
the sloth. I shouldn't say the nickname. Sorry.
I've given it to myself. I've by the jersey. Now you've made it a thing. So.
Well, I think we've got two candidates for your nickname just quickly. So Wikipedia says Catherine and Katie. Now, Tea-Towel Bates or Slotho.
I think you need to go back to the drawing board on
we'll
that
workshop
one.
it.
They're both my
good.
favourite word. Pretty crap.
Okay, fair enough. On the Wheelhouse podcast, easily digestible, mostly factual. Let's stay in Spain if we can. My name's Joel Spreadbury. Kate Bates is also present and accounted for now. We were getting very excited about Jay Vine with very good reason, but heartbreak whilst in touching distance. King of the mountain, what happened?
Touching distance, yes. Jay Vine, he was doing a sensational job. A couple of stage wins at the Vuelta.
Yeah.
Looking resplendent in the polka dot jersey. We're used to the red and white at the Tour de France, but it's blue and white at the Tour of Spain. And Joel, he went down another sack of potatoes kind of fall and had to withdraw immediately. That was on stage 18. 15 stitches. About a 10-centimetre wound for him, so he got popped straight in the ambulance, which is a real shame. I mean, I think it's really tough to finish your tour not on your terms.
Totally. Yeah.
We've only won, incidentally, the KOM jersey, or even top three at the Vuelta twice.
Yeah.
That was last year with Michael Storer, and Simon Clark won it back in 2012. So he was going to be the third Aussie to do it, and he was looking good to take it all the way to Madrid. He'll be back next year.
Yeah.
But he's been such an interesting rider this Vuelta. And his interviews have been really interesting too, Joel. He's a little bit out of the box. He's a little bit different to a lot of the riders we're used to hearing from
Yes.
in jerseys, and it's been duly noted.
Would you say Jay Vine is a little bit robot-like in the way he analyses, and he's a bit of a money ball guy?
It's a bit machine learning. It's a good question, and I think a lot of his post-race interviews, if you could say, have lacked emotion a bit.
Yeah.
Because they have been very analytical. When he crosses the line, he's quite critical, but I don't think in an emotive way. I think just in an analytical way. He'll say, this is what went right, this is what didn't go right, I'm disappointed, or I'm happy, and we move on.
Yeah.
It's caused some people to say, is he too hard on himself? But I tend to think it's just the way he processes it. So it's not even a self-reflection necessarily with emotion attached to it. It's simply, this went right, this didn't go right. Go back to the whiteboard. You know, he and his darling wife Bree have everything. They analyse everything. They do a great job. And it's, I think, the way forward for cycling, Joel, because there's so much data. I mean, you know, we collect it off the Garmin or Strava or whatever it is. We get into our own data. So you can imagine that at a pro cycling level, it's almost data overwhelmed. They've got to figure out what to do with it.
It's massive, and we were chatting to Brad McGee on this podcast just recently, and he was talking about how important, obviously, data and analytics is when it comes to appraising, making selections, all of that. Is Jay Vine a bit of a prototype for the future, the kind of rider that is just right in there with that kind of thing and all about the analytics, basically?
Yeah, he's at the forefront. We've had some Aussie riders. Adam Hansen is one that comes to mind, who was a very similar mindset, but there wasn't the same technology as today for him to then work with. But it came at an interesting time that people are talking about this, because also Team Qhubeka announced that they've got a partnership a data analytics partnership with Qlik.
Yes.
Doug Ryder, their team founder and managing director, came out and said that the Qlik analytics platform enables better decisions for the team. They've always been known to be a very data-driven team, but they are, with Qlik's help, taking it to a new level. And so I understand that Qlik are building them a beautiful dashboard to mean that wherever they are around the world with their teams, they race about 200 days a year, they can make better decisions, not just on a team level, but also on an individual level. So it's quite exciting.
What does it mean? Like it's big for these teams, isn't it?
It's huge, and I think a partner like Qlik this is their jam.
Sure.
And as teams get smarter, and we're talking about they're using it in a whole range of ways, Joel. These teams have got chief data scientists too. It's mind-blowing, right? But what they're essentially doing is they're using it for performance, no doubt. So the way they do that is certainly around analysis of riders for who to sign, also analysis of the riders' data for who to pick for each race, who's on form, rather than kind of a more old-fashioned way where you'd almost pre-select the team pretty early based on their history. You're getting some real-time data about what their form's like. They're using it for rider welfare and well-being, which is pretty important, I think, in the greater view of the sport, trying to keep them in the sport for longer and, I guess, more efficient assets to their team if you want to kind of go down the mechanical way. They're tracking their sleep. They're tracking all of these indicators of physical and mental health. But the other thing that they're doing, and this is a really interesting one with Team Qhubeka, is they're looking at the environmental footprint that cycling has with all their cars going around, the whole logistics of it, water bottles being thrown out and reused. And they're using all of these data points to create a more efficient way to run the team when in regard to their carbon footprint.
It's interesting, the sustainability aspect of it is a really interesting one. And it's as a relative newcomer to the sport, it's actually, it almost takes you by surprise when you say the carbon footprint of cycling. You're like, well, excuse me, cycling? No, it's like, well, no, when you think about the motorcades and the moto journalists, there's this whole big procession, the travelling circus. It's quite significant.
Indeed,
really interesting.
So I think we're going to try and get Doug Ryder in to chat to him all about that because so many questions, right?
And also the best possible surname for anyone associated with the sport, let me say.
Yes, he's a South African Olympian with the best name, absolutely. And also really exciting, Joel, we're also going to do a bit of a project with Qlik in the upcoming weeks and a data provider, Decision Inc., around predicting. So we're going to get them to use their machines and data to predict the results for the World Championships.
Amazing.
We might kind of pit that against
and we will finally get the answer to the question we were throwing around in a novelty sense last week. Could a robot do a better job?
I know. We will be asking that question.
We're going to find out. We're going to. On the Wheelhouse podcast. My name's Joel Spreadborough. Kate Bates is here in the sloth jersey. I'm wearing the Wheelhouse merchandise, which is fantastic. Now, sad news, obviously, in Britain and across the Commonwealth with the passing of Queen Elizabeth, and it does mean the Tour of Britain is among many sporting events involving the UK and beyond to have been cancelled. Now, there's a bigger implication to this in that it was also going to be a farewell tour for one of the great Tasmanians, Richie Porte.
Yes, the boy from Launceston, and very, very sad news coming out of the UK, and she is our queen in Australia too, was. So that it is a bit sad. And so Richie Porte, who rides for British team Ineos, the Ineos Grenadiers, he's had a remarkable career, absolutely mind-boggling athlete, leaves a real legacy. But the 37-year-old, he's pulled stumps, he's called it a day, and the Tour of Britain was supposed to be his final race. So they did ride, there were a couple of days of racing before it got cancelled. Yeah. But essentially that means that he didn't realise that was his last race.
Well, it's lovely symmetry it would have been for Ineos, of course, all of that, and that was just a PR dream. But he won't when you're done, you're done. You'd be able to speak to this. Like he's not going to say, you know what, I want to get one last event.
No,
under
look,
my belt.
I don't think so. I think that will be it's as on your terms as you can get. You know,
Sure.
I mean, he went into it knowing that anything could happen, but he's won the Tour of Swiss a number of times. He's won Paris-Nice. He's the king of Wollongong, affectionately known for his victories at the Tour Down Under, and especially his stage victories up Wollongong Hill, which is a nasty little climb in the regions of south of Adelaide. So he is pretty formidable. So we'll call him the king of Wollongong. He is also a great character, Joel. The sport will miss him. You know, I think he's paved the way for generations to come. He's raced all across the world in the Australian champions colours as well as his professional colours. And he didn't quite get his Tour de France victory. He got close. He was on the podium. But
he was on the podium. You know, incredible competitor. And I, aside from what he did on the bike, blowing up at a journalist. I remember there was a motorbike getting a bit too close to him in the Tour of 21, and he just looked at the guy and just went, "You're right, mate." And it was such a good moment. It was such a just like, get out of his face. He was just having a little moment, just getting in the slipstream behind the car. The guy's getting up his face. Just like, I'm going to tell you that I'm not actually enjoying this very much. There was another moment, and he helped someone along. They were doing a tough climb, and Richie basically gave a little moment of, you know, just a very quick, fleeting moment, but it was just like, what a guy, what a competitor. And it leads me to the bigger question. I always ask this question. I'm going to ask it again. Statue of Richie in Launceston. What do you reckon?
So I reckon. Well, he said, I'm ready for retirement, but it is going to be a big shock. And maybe a statue will help ease that transition. I'm not sure we're expecting he and his family to relocate back to Lonnie in retirement. But look, you never know.
If there's a big 12-foot bronze monument.
I think he already has the keys to the city as well.
Yep.
So he can return at whim.
Let's round it out. It has been retirement central, though. Of course, we mentioned Richie Porte, but Cameron Meyer is on the way out as well.
Oh, darling Cameron Meyer. He's just a favourite of mine. His first national team was one of my last national teams, and he was just the most phenomenal points race rider Australia has ever seen. 9 times world champion. Not just Australia's best ever points race rider, but I believe behind the great Juan Linares that he is the world's best ever points race rider. That was my event too, Joel. So we did a lot of training together. And I had the absolute privilege of watching him develop through the ranks. The kindest soul. He was billed as a big hope for the Tour de France and Grand Tours. And he tried insofar as he sacrificed a bit of track. He went over to the road to chase, I was going to say his dream, but I don't ever think it was his dream. I think people pushed that onto him because he was so talented.
Okay.
Ultimately, he pulled out of a few teams and contracts because it just wasn't for him. That's not where his heart was. His heart was on the track. And I think to show what a champion person he is, his priorities are always in the right place. His big dream with all his world titles, Joel, was to win an Olympic gold medal. And he was set to go for that at the Tokyo Olympics. When they were delayed, he was looking for it in the Madison. So they brought the Madison back in. And very sadly, his father was ill and quite ill. And he pulled out of the Olympics in order to spend some final time with his father. And in doing so, sacrificed the one thing he'd hoped for his whole career, which was to chase that Olympic gold medal. And that was a real moment for me just to show his character, because nobody wanted an Olympic gold medal more than Cameron Meyer. But family came even before that. And I just respect the heck out of that. And he will leave a tremendous legacy. He's going into coaching. I believe he's actually headed to the West Australian Institute of Sport. So he's from WA. He'll go back home.
Great.
His brother Travis is over there. And I think we can see him continuing to contribute to the sport.
Won't be lost to the sport. Statue maybe next to Ben O'Connor's over
Yes.
in...
They've got a lot. They need to find commission a statue builder. They've got a lot in the works.
Love a good statue discussion.
Yes.
That's not the only retirement, though. I think there's one more that's close to your heart.
Gosh, we've got lots. But Leah Kirchmann is going from the women. Now, she was second at La Course back in 2019. Really great all-round rider. The Canadian for DSM, she's just called Stumps. She's had a fantastic career, though. But it will change all of these retirements. Of course, they change the dynamic of the field and the way that they race. So we wish her luck on her transition as well. Hope she stays in the sport in some capacity.
On the Wheelhouse podcast, my name's Joel Spreadborough. Kate Bates is here as well. We're talking about retirements. We're talking about injuries. We saw some horrific pictures earlier of Primoz going down and also Jay Vine. This is an interesting topic, the mental cost. So the pro peloton, the schedule is unrelenting, and we've been talking for 9 weeks now, episode 9. Ding. We've been talking about riders getting to the gong and all that. And as we've gone along, we've seen a bit of an attrition rate, haven't we, of riders that we were maybe excited to see that aren't going to get here for various reasons. Some of them are mental health, and some of them are coping, I guess, taking some time out to sort of deal with the strain, the pressure, not just physically, but of course mentally as well. So I think, especially in light of what's happened with Roglic in Spain, Jumbo are a bit concerned about his state. Is that right?
Yeah, it's their director, Engels. He came out and he said, that he's concerned that more than his body being physically broken, he's concerned that Roglic is mentally broken after all the barriers he's come up against. The resilience that we talk about with him has been tested time and time again, and there is a breaking point for everybody. It also reminds me, Richie Porte didn't ride the Tour de France in 2022 because he said he just did not enjoy the pressure of 2021, and he felt like he was past the point of being able to win a Tour de France, and he just didn't want to do it. He didn't like that. You add to that Tom Dumoulin, who's retiring, also saying that he's done his best, but it's all a bit too much, and he took a mental health break. You can see in the imagery of Roglic after he crashed, just his
and the weight
soul,
of expectation going into that GT was enormous.
Yeah,
because he is the King of Spain, has been for a number of years.
He has, yes.
We saw it with Richie.
And we need to remember that Jonas Vingegaard,
your mate.
My mate, long-lost Danish cousin.
Exactly.
He hasn't been seen since the Tour de France because he's been too overwhelmed by it all, and he's taken an extended mental health break after that. It's all started coming together in my mind, Joel, because you see these headlines and you think, oh, that's a shame, you hope they do well. But more and more, it's adding up to a bit of a picture where I think something needs to change. We were trying to look forward to Wollongong in terms of who was going to arrive on our shores to chase that rainbow. But there's been a couple who aren't coming who've cited stress and pressure as part of that. One of those was, of course, Mads Pedersen.
Yes, we're getting very excited about
that
potential.
He has took the green jersey at the Vuelta, but he said he just wants to go home and see his family. It's been a long season and he just needs, mentally he needs a break. And Tom Pidcock, the great British hope who we thought would be perfectly suited, he's pulled out of World Championships. He said he targeted the Mountain Bike World Championships. It didn't go well, and he said he was so lost after that that he just cannot even fathom how to mentally prepare for another World Championships.
I couldn't hack another build-up. Messages like this, I want to go home, I'm overwhelmed. Bing, 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 like hello.
Yeah,
alarm bells.
And I think that they need to just really consider this. And I suppose this goes back to what we were talking about with Team Qhubeka and using the data around the rider well-being. Maybe the riders won't need to make these big statements and get to breaking point. They might be able to better manage this through the season so that it's happening less and less.
We love celebrating their victories. We love watching Jonas in the private jet and the reception. We love Pidcock jumping into a fountain, having a bit of fun. At the end of the day, they're young men and women. The sport is incredibly exerting, as you know better than anyone. and the pressure, the attention is enormous. So, look, I say, as sad as it is to miss out on seeing some of these faces in the gong, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. Ultimately, that's going to prolong your career, and it's going to send the right message to, I guess, the future generations.
Let's be
of the
kind,
peloton.
people. And I mean, we were talking about Remco earlier, Remco Evenepoel. Did he get a flat or not? Well, I think regardless of that, he's getting a lot of online hate and debate. And I think everybody needs to bear in mind that they actually read a lot of these comments.
Of course.
But look, a lot of this has come up in context of the World Championships because, Joel, a little bit more of a bummer is Valverde. He's been world champion before. He's won 12 stages of the Vuelta. He has said that he would love to come, but he doesn't have permission. That was a headline this week.
Explain.
From his team. He
why?
rides for Movistar. Movistar have said, and the Spanish have been quite vocal about this, they're having troubles filling a team for the World Championships because the teams, their professional teams, aren't allowing them to travel because they're worried about relegation.
Okay, so this is interesting because we were just talking about mental strain. It's like if this was coming from a welfare point of view and the team went public and said, we want them to have a break for these reasons, sure, but it's not. It's about... more pressure, more expectation.
More pressure and expectation and more disappointment and more feeling like he's not valued. The biggest real bummer for me around this one is that this is Valverde's last season. He's 42 years of age. He said this will be his last season. As we can see from any photos of Valverde, he wears rainbow stripes around his arms because he has been road world champion before. He was supposed to finish his career at the Worlds. Yeah. And he won't get to do that now. So that is a real bummer and a lot of debate around whether or not teams should be relegated from World Tour. Are they doing the right thing? We will have to check in at the end of the season to discuss the implications of that. But I think it's fair to say that it's having some unintended consequences. UCI might need to go back to the drawing board on that one.
Yeah, it's a big old hot pot, especially when you factor in some of the other matters we've been discussing as well on the Wheelhouse podcast. We're talking about spirit animals. I left one out. Yes. Kate Bates.
What's your other spirit animal?
The magpie. The dreaded.
That can't be a spirit animal. That's like a fear, a mortal fear.
Demon bird.
I know why you're bringing this up. Because we were talking about Wollongong, and it's magpie season.
Woonona.
And I don't think it's a hotspot. It is a well-known
there before.
Hotspot, and the race goes straight by there.
Ooh.
I do not think our international visitors are prepared for magpies. I think, they've probably heard about the snakes and spiders that Australia has to offer.
Yeah.
I reckon in their cushy hotels they'll probably
be
safe from those.
Fly under the radar, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's, an unknown. Should we put together a public service announcement for them, Joel?
Maybe. I'm genuinely curious. How drastic action? What would happen if there was a magpie strike early in the event, and there was what do you do? How do you? Does everyone come out with protective spikes in their helmets or googly eyes?
You mean like when you see bike riders with all of those
zip ties
stuck to their helmet, trying to warn them off? But apparently, if they can't see your eyes, that's when they swoop. So sunglasses on the back of the helmet, perhaps.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to tell them.
They've got to know.
I mean, maybe we can get Merksy, chief of production here at the Wheelhouse, to swoop. I like what you did there. No, to perhaps put together a little package to send them all, put it on social media, tag them all in, make sure they know how to handle the magpie.
I think we could do that. Experiment with some options to if you're going through a magpie zone, as they will be. What they usually say is seek an alternate route. Don't go through it. Get off your bike and walk. That's not going to happen at the World Championships.
It is not. It will be a very memorable event, but I hope not for the magpies.
I'm going to do it. Put a little thing together of what you need to do to be safe, some options, some headwear that you can consider when you're going through a magpie zone to try and deter the demon birds.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, other than just the riders coming. Now, the teams they're announced September 13, confirmed teams. That's the deadline for the teams. But there's so much other things going on. We've got the ambassador, Cadel Evans, has been out and around. He's coming to Australia soon. He'll be there in Wollongong for the event.
I love that. You know, there's another ambassador that I'm particularly, as a newcomer to the sport and someone that hasn't been a cycling enthusiast for my whole life, there's a new ambassador, my mate, Emma McKean.
One of your mates.
How about
Emma McKean,
that?
Australia's most successful Olympian in the pool, not on the bike.
All of her gold medals reside in the Gong. She's signed up to be an ambassador. She said, look, the admiration I have for the peloton is out of this world. They are incredible athletes, but you won't get me tackling that. She'll tackle anything else. But
she's a town bike rider, Joel. Yeah. I mean, perhaps you could take her for a jaunt.
A townie, yeah.
Yes.
I love a townie. Yeah,
well, and it actually reminds me, Wollongong have this really cool program in place that, to my knowledge, most major events don't have, called a legacy program, where the government's given different projects some funding to make sure the footprint of the Wollongong World Championships is kept going. So Wollongong is a bike city, being given a international bike city label for anybody seeking a bit of cycle tourism. But they've also got some other really cool projects, and one of which I discovered yesterday. It's called Yesterday's Stories. And what they do, Joel, is it's an app. And when you ride through specified routes around Wollongong, it tells you all the historical facts about the region automatically as you hit the kilometre markers. As you approach a kilometre marker, it'll tell you about the area and what's gone. That's
quite amazing. Cool. That's like the tours you go on when you go to places like Alcatraz and you walk around. It's like,
but it's Cycling Central one. It's very immersive. So some really cool stuff. And Destination Wollongong, they've also put together this incredible cycling library online, best cafes to ride to, best routes, how to avoid the Magpies, all that sort of stuff. They're doing a really good job down there.
Waving the starting flag to get the event underway. Very, 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 very special.
I didn't realise she was waving the flag.
That's
cool.
She'll be out there.
Very cool.
Will Cody Simpson be there?
Ooh.
Singing a song, a gong song.
They've got to be the most famous sports couple at the moment, right?
Yeah.
You know, I nearly called him a songstress. Singer, very famous singer, Cody Simpson, who is now a very good swimmer, incidentally, with his little comeback. The Golden Couple. I don't know. It'd be great to have him sing the gong.
The gong song.
The gong song.
Yeah. We'll write it. We'll write the lyrics. We just need to front up and sing.
I reckon our songwriting skills might be akin to our design skills, Joel.
The gong, gong. It's a song about the gong, gong, gong.
Let's leave that to Cody.
Maybe. But look, how exciting. So much happening on the road to Wollongong. We'll be there as well. Very quickly, before we go, Kate, we mentioned last week the Submariners recreating the TDF course in honour of their mate who lost his life due to some mental health concerns. They continue. They're doing a brilliant job of it.
Yes, they are. So you can follow along on their Just Giving page. We'll pop that in the show notes. They're having 10.5-hour days. So it is a long, difficult journey for them. I think that's part of the point, Joel.
Yep.
They will do quite a lot of soul searching on those days, long days in the saddle. Let's hope they have at least 1 to 2 shamooses on each day.
Just as an absolute
yes,
minimum.
To keep that seat as comfortable as possible. But do follow along because I love what they're doing, and they should be finished in or around when Wollongong is being raced. So we'll
Symmetry.
We'll drop in and see how they're doing.
Wrap it all up. We'll be in Wollongong as well. Very excited. This is the Wheelhouse podcast. It's been a fun ride. Episode 9, Kate Bates. Whew.
Woof.
Woo. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back to do it all again and hit double figures next week. See you then. The Wheelhouse is produced by River City Studios for Listener. Executive produced by Luke Mears and the mysterious Merksy. It's written and hosted by Kate Bates and me, Joel Spreadborough.